Hey everyone, Sue Daly here, and I'm with you this week to talk about putting borders on to the center of our Infusion quilt. So there I have my center block and I've trimmed it up as it tells you in the pattern, and I'm going to talk to you about the borders. So originally in the Raspberry Tea quilt I have actually mitered these borders on here because it's a border print and it looks much better if you miter them. However, if you want to, you can just cut your measure through the center of your block and cut two pieces that measurement, and sew one on the top and one on the bottom, and then press them and then measure through the center of your block again, cut them to that length and sew them either side. If you want to do that, that's okay. However, today I'm going to show you what I do when I put borders on. And I'm going to show you how I do mitered borders. So I call it the Sue Daly cheating method, but that's okay if it works. Doesn't matter if you cheat. So I'm going to take my border piece. So I have my piece of border and it's 2.5 inches wide. So I'm going to show you how to miter these. So when you're doing a mitered border, you need to make sure you've got the length plus whatever the borders are going to be on either side. So these are going to be these borders are 2.5 inches. They'll be finished at 2, but I'm going to cut this length, plus I'm going to add another 5 inches either side, so that I'm going to have that overhang here because the outside is going to be out here, and we can trim that back later. So I need to cut my piece of fabric this long. However, for this video I'm just going to leave it the length that it is, and I'll trim it off later. So what I do is I make sure I get my block onto my ironing surface. I give it a press, and then I'm going to take my trusty Sue Daly glue. With the glue I'm going to use it really sparingly, and I'm going to place it about 1/8 of an inch along the edge, and I'm just going to put really small dots on there. So I'm just going to place little dots about 1/8 of an inch in from the edge. And this acts like pins. Now you don't want too much of it because you don't want it to go all stiff, but it will wash out. And then I'm going to take my border piece, and I'm going to lay that and make sure I've got about 2.5 inches hanging over this end here. And I'm going to lay it on there. I'm not going to stretch it. I'm just going to lay it on flat. I'm going to press that so the glue dries. Make sure you line the edges up. And the good thing about this, and the reason I do this, is because when I sew borders on, and like many of you, probably this happens, I think it happens to other people, is when you put a border onto the side of a quilt, you cut it all the right length and everything, and all of a sudden you have a little bit left over. Might be just 1/4 of an inch, but it sort of doesn't fit properly unless you put 1,000 pins into it. And that always happened to me for the longest time. But since I've been doing this, what this does is it makes sure that your border is on your block, and because I've put the little spots of glue all the way along there, it's going to hold it. So it's going to stop that border piece from traveling under the foot of your sewing machine and you ending up with a little bit extra on the end. So if you see, when I pick this up, it's all glued on there, okay? And when I put it under my sewing machine, it's going to be really easy to sew. So I don't have to pin anything, it's already on there. But what I would do, first of all, is I'm going to mark a little spot 1/4 inch in from the top there, and 1/4 inch in from the side. And I'll put a spot there, and 1/4 inch from the top, and 1/4 inch in from the side here, and put a spot there, because I'm going to sew from spot to spot. And I'm going to be back really soon, and I'll show you what I've done. Okay, so I'm back. I've sewn my border onto my block there with 1/4 inch seam allowance, and if you'll notice that I have where I placed a spot here, 1/4 inch in from the top edge and across on the side, and I've sewn to that spot, so we have that little bit there. Now what we want to do is we want to set the seams, so we press it like this, and then I just roll it back and press, so my seam allowance is going out into the darker side, so into the border. Give that a press like that. Alrighty, then we're going to sew the next border on, but I'm going to glue it on first. So I'm going to turn it round, and I have my, you can see where that is just only sewn to there. So I'm going to take my next border piece, and again I'm going to make sure it hangs over this edge about 2.5 inches, and it will hang over this edge here. So I'm going to place my glue along the edge about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, just little spots of it. Make sure you don't put it right on the very point. I'm going to lay that on there, making sure I've got my overhang. Don't stretch it, just lay it on there, and then I'm going to run my iron over it to set the glue. Okay, there we have it. Now what I want to do is take my pen or my marking pencil, and I'm going to mark 1/4 inch in from either side there. So that's where I'm going to sew to, and then I'm going to move over here. I'm going to mark 1/4 inch down from the top, and right where I finish my stitch there, so I can get a spot there that I can sew from spot to spot. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you what I've done, and then I'll show you how to miter that. Okay, so I'm back again. I've done my 1/4 inch seam along this side, putting my border on, sewing just from spot to spot. Now I'm going to set my seams again, so press them, and then I'm going to roll it out and press my seam allowance out into the border. Okay, now here comes the fun part. This is how I do my miters. Okay, so we've got 2 pieces coming one way and the other way. One going up the back, I'll just press that little crease out of there, and one coming across this way. So what I want to do is we're going to lay that one in flat, make sure it's pressed in there. Now I'm going to take this top piece and I'm going to fold it back on a 45-degree angle like that. Make sure you line all that up. Then I'm going to take my ruler. So you need a ruler that has your 45-degree on it, whether it's a big one like this or a little small one, doesn't matter, so long as you've got your 45-degree marking on it. And I'm going to line this up. I'm going to put, so my 45 degrees, I'm going to lay my lines so that they run along my seam allowance here, so this one coming up this way and this one coming along this way, and my 45 degrees is going to go right along where I've mitered that corner, and you will see whether you've got it right. So if it's not quite right, and I can see that mine's about 1 millimeter out there, I'm just going to lay that, and it's probably going to be okay once I press it. So I'll just put it back in there, make sure I line up my seams, and that's perfect. So what I do then is I press it to make sure it doesn't move. And then I'm going to take my glue and I'm going to just fold this back, and I'm going to put a couple of little spots on here, just tiny wee spots. It's going to hold that in place. Make sure you fold it back to the fold line and then press it on. I know so many people out there really struggle with doing mitered corners, and you know, I would do them the way that I was taught initially, and I would get 3 perfect and 1 really dodgy looking corner, and I don't know why it was, it just always happened. And I'm sure that there's, you know, people have that same problem as what I had. It would all pucker up in the corner here, so I thought I need to find another way to do this so that it's perfect every time, and so this is the way I do it. So that's why I call it the cheating, pseudo cheating mitered corners. So if you can see that it's nice and flat in the corner, now it's glued down there, and what I'm going to do is take my needle and thread and I'm going to applique that down. So if anybody ever looked at my quilts after they've been quilted and they were hanging, if you went up and had a look at the miters on there, you would not have a clue how I did those, whether I did it, you know, the traditional way or whether I've done it my way. But once I applique that down, you're not going to know the difference. and it's going to sit nice and flat just like it is there. So I'm going to go and get some needle and thread, and I'm going to show you how to apply that down. Okay, so now that we've got this all glued up and ready to go, I've got a needle and thread here, and I've got a knot in the end of my thread. So you need to, if you're working with a cotton fabric, you need to, cotton thread, you need to match your colour exactly to that pink, or go one shade darker, don't go any lighter. However, you can sew it with the either the Superior Bottom Line or the Wonderful Deco Bob, which is an 80 weight thread, a polyester thread. So I'm going to come up from the bottom, and I'm going to just sort of manipulate my way around those seams in the back there. I'm going to come up and bring my needle up right at the very point there. And like always, I'm going to sew from right to left, because I'm right-handed, right to left across the top of my work, and I'm just going to applique this down just like a normal applique stitch. So I'll just sew that down. I just love the way this, how I get this together, because it's always just right. I never have any problems. I never have to worry that it's going to pucker in the corners, or whether I've sewn it on the you know, exactly on the 45-degree angle. It just takes all the guesswork out of it, and I think that you'll find, if you try this method, that you will love doing mitered corners, and that you will probably do them more often. Especially if you're using a border print or some sort of a print into the corners, you know, in your border, that you want to sit nicely in the corners, because often if you just do your square set corners, then sometimes it can look a bit, you know, sort of random in the corners if your fabrics aren't lining up properly. Particularly if you've got a border type print or a stripe, sometimes it changes the whole look of the quilt, and if it's nicely mitered with everything matching up, it just looks so much better. However, with this print, doesn't matter, you can do square set corners, because it's just one of those prints that it doesn't really matter. So because I'm finishing my stitch right up in the seam allowance, I'm just going to do a double stitch there, and then I'm just going to knot that off. Probably just knot it off twice so it doesn't come undone. Okay, and then I can just clip that off. Okay, there you have it. One beautiful flat mitered corner. Now all I'm going to do is fold that back and trim with some sharp scissors. You want to trim this in from here, 1/4 of an inch in from the edge. You can cut it with your rotary cutter, or you can trim it with your scissors, whatever you think is best for you. Often usually I would use a very large pair of scissors to do this job, not a pair of embroidery scissors. However, we'll get to the end of that. Okay, there we have it. One beautiful mitered corner. Now how good's that? Everyone can be an expert. Flat, perfect. And all you're going to do now is go around and do all of the other three exactly the same. Okay, I'll see you next time.